Here's an article from Game Rant about how the new game coming out later this year, Outriders, is what Mass Effect Andromeda should have been. Now, that's a hard thing to say since Andromeda was a botched game on launch. It had a lot of design issues, so a lot of things that they wanted to do with Andromeda never saw the light of day. It's kind of like a No Man's Sky bigger budget that failed to deliver, and then you combine that with really bad facial animations, a host of bugs, and who knows where they were trying to go with the story that not too many people cared about. I guess you could say the multiplayer was a lot more fun than the previous title, but it depends on who actually appreciated the third game more, or at least the multiplayer more. And looking at Mass Effect, it's pretty generic as a space opera goes. There's only a few things in it, like the Mass Effect, like biotics, the mass relays that really make it iconic. Everything else is pretty generic. And I guess that's kind of the point, though. It wanted to be a hardcore science fiction story initially and became something else. So with Outriders, I think we saw a gameplay trailer or a gameplay style pre-rendered background trailer, I think a month or two ago. Looked fine. The great thing about this is it has no microtransactions, no de novo. It's not a games as service title. And we've seen some gameplay from the trailer, so that's always nice. So this is where I get a little confused. One look at Outriders gives a Mass Effect meets Mad Max vibe, all right, as while Mass Effect was about the grandiose of the galaxy ignoring the threat of elimination. No, Mass Effect was about fighting the threat of elimination, not ignoring it. Outriders is the rugged landscape of a barren planet looking for its salvation, which I guess you can say was what Andromeda was trying to be. But that's the crux. The similarities between the two go far deeper than aesthetics. And it seems that Outriders may be what Mass Effect Andromeda failed to be. Okay, let's see where we're going here. Mass Effect Andromeda wasn't a bad game, but it did fail to live up to expectations. The graphic bugs, the more straightforward story. Whoa, what a story. Ugh. And the lack of a genuine Mass Effect identity, there you go, see? Contributed to a ton of shortcomings. However, at its core, it seems to tell the same story that Outriders is looking at. Okay, so the same plot. That's fine. You can do simple things like that. So if he's referring to the plot, it has the same scenario, being thrust into an alien world, trying to survive, trying to rebuild culture or civilization. Great. With the third person or first person action adventure, perhaps looter shooter, perhaps run and gun, perhaps chest high walls, who knows. Leaving the Milky Way to colonize, expand humanity into Andromeda, the plan is to create a colony to facilitate travel to and fro before that quickly goes awry. Instead, the Nexus acts as a central hub as the fight against the Ket, and of course the Pathfinder and friends of Mass Effect Andromeda utilize several abilities to do so. Yeah, that's essentially the scenario of the plight of Mass Effect Andromeda. So Outriders begins with the colonization of an important planet called Enoch, where they manage to establish the first city. Getting I guess it's kind of like Andromeda, I guess. That is, of course, until everything goes awry and the sea is hit by an anomaly that later triggers a massive explosion. Outriders players earn abilities as one of 4 different classes and then begin their journey to discover the mysterious signal. So it sounds like biotics are a magical phenomenon that just happened to everyone, like a meteorite crashing onto Earth and all of a sudden people get hit by gamma radiation, they turn into mutants and have superpowers. Very similar to Marvel scenarios. The setup of each sci-fi RPG is based on the idea of colonization and survival, making them very similar in the roots. Yes, the premise sounds similar. You can say that. The plot can sound similar too, but we're still talking about very different ideas, very different games, very different stories. Where they begin to differ, though, is in terms of presentation. Okay, that's interesting because you're talking about the quality of a AAA title, and how Andromeda was a AAA title just didn't feel like it. It looked like it was lacking. There was a lack of polish, obviously, with the number of bugs and problems, which you could say the same for their other games that came out. One example of this is Outworld World Tiers, much like other games such as Division 2 or Borderlands 3's Mayhem Mode, but tweaking it so that it is tied to progression. Players who struggle on one world tier cannot callously progress to the next, instead of having to work, survive, and eventually unlock it. So it sounds as if you have these benchmarks you have to hit, and you have to get good, and skill up, and level up, and then you can advance. Okay, a progression system. The classes don't seem to follow a basic RPG niche of warrior, rogue, and wizard. Instead, they have the trickster, the time manipulator, the pyromancer, a fire manipulator, and devastator, a seismic attacker. Okay? And there's a fourth one that's yet to be revealed. But it's essentially a shooter, like Andromeda, third person. Then there's a fourth class that's hidden, and we don't know what that is. Okay, so not too much information we have yet. So saying that Outriders looks like what Mass Effect Andromeda should have been comes with a major caveat: the marketing. Oh boy, well, that can go either way. It could be lying to you, or it could be under-promising. So probably more to the former than the latter, but there's not so much information on the game. Successful and interesting marketing campaigns do not effectively create a successful and interesting game, and that's true of the industry as a whole. Yeah, just look at Planescape Torment. Barely any marketing you can think of. Outriders look like a lot of things, but until it is received, this is just speculation. Based on the Game Rant's own Outriders preview, the self-evident themes between the two and the promising innovations and reveals thus far, it won't take much to change Outriders looks like into Outriders is what Mass Effect Andromeda should have been. Now, the problem I have with this is you have to know exactly what Mass Effect is and what Mass Effect should have been to come with these conclusions. And as it stands, what Mass Effect Andromeda should have been is a whole other game, a whole other design choice. And we don't have much information on Outriders, let alone the inside scope and workings of Bioware and all the details and all the design docs that were thrown away, or game development that was also thrown away. We have some. So will you get a tank? Will you get a car? Will you be jumping around planets? Will you have a relationship system? Will you have a dialogue system? All these details we would have to compare. So it's a hard sell, this sort of argument. But Mass Effect is kind of a generic space opera adventure. And to compare that to it seems as if an alien world that these people are thrown into, not for the sake of preserving humanity, but just to have an adventure where you're trying to have a city that survives whatever conflicts arise. I don't know. Hard to say. We don't have enough information, but I think this is a bit of a stretch. If anyone has any information about Andromeda, of how it should have been, and knows more about Outriders, and you can draw connections, please tell me, because I'm curious what this new space opera style game is all about. It did pique my interest, but not by much. It looked kind of generic to me. So maybe Outriders is going to be better than I think it is. And if so, please point me in the right direction for more information. I'd be happy to read about it. Thanks for listening, and have yourself a great day.